So I've built and launched customized voice solutions for over 17 clients now and automated more than 50,000 calls across multiple different industries. In this video, I'll show you exactly my entire end-to-end process of testing voice agents, what to do before we launch them, what are certain things that we need to test for, and once we actually launch them, how do we refine them and continuously improve the agent, right? I'll show you also what are certain things that we can do manually and some things that we could automate. In terms of like maybe creating simulations to run these test cases for us without having us to actually call the agent ourselves and make these changes and understand whether it works or not. I'll first start off with explaining to you why we need so many testing involved in the first place. First of all, if we understand the overview of how the client journey looks like, obviously we start off with discovery and requirements gathering. Anything that the client wants, we're going to gather whatever functions that we need, any CRMs, any APIs, what are the different call intentions that we have, assuming we have appointment booking, we have general FAQs, we have call transfers. We need to gather all of those things, and we can kind of then plan out how we want our voice agents to look like. Then once we have all of those bits, we go into the development and the engineering testing phase. Here is where we actually build out the voice agent on our platforms. We build out the end-to-end workflows. We build out all of the automations in the backend. We connect everything together. There's obviously a lot more bits that happens in between these stages, but just a very simple general overview. Then before we actually deploy it, we need to go through what you call a pre-launch testing. And this is actually one of the more important bits. Although I can sometimes argue that the post-launch is more important. But pre-launch is where we basically test to see if every single bit that we have built for this agent works. So this could be whether intentions are properly routed in terms of the conversation logic. Does it actually properly transfer the call when we need to? Is it able to answer questions correctly based on the knowledge base that we provide it with? Is it able to book in certain appointments and actually appear in your CRM and send email automations and all that kind of stuff? This is all that happens in pre-launch. Then once we deploy it, what happens is now when we deploy the voice agent, people actually would call in and start testing the voice agent themselves. They would start to have their own real human conversations, and this is the point where we need to actually start to understand that many different cases in terms of in many cases when voice agents speak to real human interactions, they are not exactly how we expected it to be, and therefore it may not work in certain scenarios. And this is where refinement comes in, because now we need to know what happens when we have a conversation with a customer that we have not thought about and we haven't really built the logic for that specific type of conversation. And now how are we able to then refine it and improve it and then add on to it, right? So that goes into more of like a continuous optimization process where now it's testing with real human interactions. So there's human testing, it learns from new interactions. So there's new scenarios that we never thought of. Now it learns, then we refine it, we add it to the voice agent, so now it knows, and then we redeploy, and then we test, and then we learn, and then we refine. This is an endless loop. So this process is actually a really, really long process, depending on how complex the agent is in the first place. If it's just a really, really simple one, something like an appointment reminder agent, just like a 30-second call where we remind someone for an appointment that they have, then obviously there is not much optimization needed. In most cases, this process isn't a very long process, but for cases where we have multiple different use cases in that one voice agent, this could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to improve and optimize. So now that we understand what this client journey looks like, just to quickly summarize what we have here, we basically have two key stages. One's happening pre-launch and one's happening post-launch. So pre-launch, as I mentioned, it just ensures technical quality and voice performance. Post-launch is when we have real human interactions, and then we actually improve it and refine. Because no one can predict every possible user input, post-testing ensures your agent evolves to handle nearly every real-world scenario gracefully. So what I mean by that is, there are just a million different ways humans could speak in a conversation on a call. So the idea is that we want to try to consolidate as many different scenarios as possible. So what happens under the hood is basically we have, let's say, 5 different main call intentions of a call. And call intentions meaning there could be 5 kind of like use cases. And just to give you an example, one use case, as I mentioned, could be appointment booking. One use case could be call transfers. One use case could be rescheduling. So if someone calls in and they asked about they want to book in an appointment for one of your services, right? It goes down the intention of booking appointment. So that it goes down the first state where we need to book appointments. So we need to know that anything that has to do with appointment booking should go under that scenario. So whether they start off the conversation by immediately saying they need to book appointment, or whether they ask general questions first and then move into appointment booking, as long as there's an appointment booking intention, it should go down to that path. Right, so we try to consolidate all of the different million possible scenarios where the conversations could be about appointment booking, and we route that to appointment booking. So that is the idea, right? We want to try to consolidate as many different scenarios as possible into each own individual states, so that we can properly handle each scenario. So that's why there's a lot of testing involved. There's a lot of refinement involved to make sure it works 99% of the time. Otherwise, first of all, when you it's kind of impossible to first predict exactly how all the conversations could look like in the development phase before actually testing it. So therefore, as I mentioned here, there's no such thing as a one and done. If someone promises you that they can build you like $10,000 voice agent one time and just launch it and it works perfectly, I hate to break it to you, it's probably not going to be a very good build. He's probably not very experienced. When you actually build out this voice agent, you realize that there's just so many different edge cases that you wouldn't have thought of. And it's not your fault, because we wouldn't know exactly how everyone could speak, right? That just everyone has their own way of having conversations on a call. So there's not really anything much we could do, but other than refining and improving the agent over time. But so yeah, in this video, I'm just going to explain mostly on what happens to pre-launch. Post-launch, we have its own process of refining and optimizing, listening to the call recordings and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot more that goes into that. If you want a video about that, just let me know. But we're just going to talk more about the pre-launch testing here. So I kind of separated into manual and automated. So manually is just how we just manually call the voice agent using our phones or the web calls, or there's some like a chat feature. So this is where in most cases, manual calls can do everything automated calls do, but there are some things automated calls have where we could have some sort of advantage over manual calls, right? And I'll explain that in a bit. But I just want to kind of go through some of these things here first, which we'll start off with manual. Reason why we want to have manual testing done as well is because there are three main things here that I just listed out. So first off, obviously, we want to listen to the voice quality, right? You want to first understand if the tone, the pacing, the emotions there, do you pick the right voice? There are multiple different voices out there. There are thousands out there. You can check on 11 Labs. You can check from multiple different platforms. We want to try to pick a voice that has the right tone, right pacing, right emotion for the use case. Is the volume loud enough? Is it clear? Does it have natural pauses? Any awkward silences you want to remove? It doesn't sound robotic. And one important thing, which I think I want to quote this, is does it pronounce things properly? In many voice agent use cases that I see, it requires the voice agent to speak and understand addresses, letters, emails, and all that kind of stuff. And when you repeat it back to the customer, we need to repeat it in a very human way, right? Just for example, if I want to repeat an email, let's say like an email, jun@gmail.com, how we will pronounce it is jun@gmail.com, right? And we spell it jun@gmail.com. If you don't properly prompt the voice agent to pronounce it in this way, it could pronounce it really badly, right? It could say like John a@gmi.com. It's like it's a lot of ways that we need to prompt it so that it pronounces it right. So this is the same for phone numbers, emails, addresses, house addresses, letters, emails, etc. So we need to make sure that's done. Real world conditions, this is kind of optional. We don't need to, but it's just good to test this in real environments. So in most cases, when humans actually call in, they may be in very noisy environments. There's going to be a lot of background chatter when you're in a cafe or in an office. The voice agent may not be able to listen to them properly. So if you test it yourself in these real environments and you see it work, you can see how reliable the speech to text is. So this is one more thing. And then lastly is obviously just human feel. When you speak to it manually, you can kind of understand how conversational it could get, and doesn't really sound scripted. And then what we could do that can be done both manually and automated. And also, by the way, what I mean by automated is when we have like certain simulations where we could automatically test it. And things like retail, you could see, I can open this example case here. So something like retail, they actually have like a simulation at the top where you could create test cases, where you can put in like your user prompt, success criteria, what defines a test that to be successful. We can add in dynamic variables, custom functions, and stuff like that. So that those are very useful. I think Vappy has their own one as well, and there are also some third-party platforms that does these automated calls. But yeah, these are certain things that we could be doing for both manually and automated. Conversation flow and logic, conversation logic and flow. This is the most important thing, I suppose. We want to understand whether it's able to actually route the conversations properly. Is it able to handle the conversations properly? Does it go into the correct branches? What happens when you go off script, right? If you talk about something that's totally unrelated to the call, is it able to bring it back to the conversation, the purpose of the conversation itself, right? Are there any fallbacks, any error handling that happens if the call is unrelated to the purpose of it, right? These are certain things that you need to look at. Function calls and integrations. These are for, let's say you build out appointment booking functions. We have check availability, we have book appointment, we have cancel appointment, reschedule, things like that. When we integrate these tools to your voice agent, is it able to run these tools properly? Is it able to retrieve availabilities from your calendar properly? Does it even run in the first place, right? Do you integrate it properly? Are there any API calls that's involved that you didn't really look into as well? All of these things are very important. And then one more thing is post-call analysis. In most cases, for every call that's been done, we want to also have some sort of post-call analysis. And this is where we basically analyze the transcript of the call, see what's the outcome of it, run certain functions after the call based on the outcome, and all that kind of stuff, right? This is mostly done in n8n, but it's also part of the process of testing a voice agent to see if that works. And then verify the responses are triggered and data passes through successfully. So that's fine. And then there's knowledge-based retrieval. This is especially important if the business that you're building it for requires very high precision of retrieving information. So one example is assuming you are building it for a company that sells multiple different products. Say it's for like an e-commerce store. When a customer calls in and asks for a certain price of a product, is it able to retrieve those information on what the exact price is for that product? And what are the percentage of, what's the accuracy in terms of receiving this information properly, right? This is very important because now if, assuming, let's say, out of 10 tries where you call the voice agent and is able to retrieve this information, maybe 8 out of 10 it's correct inputs where we have the correct price for the products, but the 2 times is not correct, right? We don't want that to happen. We want to try to get that to be 100% correct. So knowledge retrieval is very important. So that is one thing that you have to test as well. And then dynamic variable handling. So dynamic variables is a bit of a tricky one. In terms of when you're building voice agents with multiple different dynamic variables, we need to see if they are properly enriched. And what I mean by that is in most cases, for example, like outbound calls, when you make outbound calls through like a HTTP request, typically you want to pass in some dynamic variables like first name, last name, the email, so that when the agent calls the lead or the customer, it knows their name and it's properly enriched, right? So we want to first test if, let's say, those are properly enriched. First thing, are they used correctly? Validate conditional logic based on variables here. What I mean by this is assuming we have a voice agent that has multiple different routes based on whether the lead is qualified or not. Assuming there's 2 routes, one is qualified lead, one is unqualified lead. If it's a qualified lead, it could be passed in as a dynamic variable where the voice agent could see, okay, this lead is qualified, let's try to go down a different script. So we have a different script where we speak to the lead and say, okay, you are qualified, you'll do this, you do this. Is it able to conditionally move to that state, right? And what I mean, and this can be done by passing in a dynamic variable directly to the voice agent itself. So yeah, we could test that as well, and then check variable enrichment for outbound and post-call workflows. This is also for post-call, which is where after every call, we get some variables that's been collected from the call. Is it properly passed? Is it properly collected? And how we're going to use that after the call. So that's that for dynamic handling, dynamic variable handling. And then guardrails and escalations. This is just essentially making sure that the purpose of that call stays within that same purpose, right? if someone's calling into like a plumbing company asking about plumbing services, and then suddenly they're asking you like, what's the recipe for baking a cake or whatever, right? We don't want to be able to handle those kind of calls. We want to try to steer them back and tell them like, unfortunately, I'm not not an expert in baking cakes, right? We want to be able to stick to the main use case of the voice agent, and make sure that there's some sort of fallback when it comes to handling this kind of conversations. So yeah, these can be done both automated and manual, which I suppose in most cases manually can be done you can manually do all of these testing, but there are some things that you could also automate as well. So that's why I put it in both manual plus automated. And this is what I consider to be some of the advantages of generating simulations to run these test cases, right? In terms of assuming you want to test what are the percentage of success rate where it retrieves information correctly. So that is where large scale scenario coverage, where we want to talk about this, right? Generate many different cases around the same intent. This, for example, is assuming you are a company that sells tires, right? Let's say you sell tires for your company. There could be a million different ways a conversation could start. Someone could call in and ask for what is the price of a tire for my car, and there are many different cars, many different types of cars, many different tire sizes, many different prices for each ones. All of these things comes under like the same intention where we need to determine what's the price. So there's knowledge retrieval. However, what I mean by generating different test cases around the same intent is people could ask for the price in many different ways, right? They could ask, what's the price for my tire for my car? That's 2025 car, Tesla S or whatever. That could be one way. Another way they could ask is, I want to ask you for the price for a tire, and then the agent should ask me, okay, so if you want to know what's the price, what's the tire size, what's your how many tires are you looking for, and all that kind of stuff. It's the same intention, but a different way of phrasing it, right? So how we want to do it is basically generate as many different test cases around the same intention, so we can test all of them to see if everything works. This is just a way to essentially cover more of the same scenario to make sure that it really works. It just which also essentially increases the accuracy of your voice agent, right? And then very structured, short, long conversations. Some people speak fast, some people speak slow, some people talk a lot, some people go straight to the point, right? We want to have some sort of structure here. User change their mind mid-call. Is it able to handle those scenarios as well? User give information in a different order, and all this kind of stuff, right? So we want to run all of these test cases to confirm that in there's multiple different ways a conversation could look like, it should still reach the right outcome. So this is one of the many advantages of automating these calls. And then you could also use it for knowledge retrieval, assuming you have you want to track what is the scores in terms of retrieving information. So like I mentioned, assuming you want to retrieve the price of a product from your knowledge base, what's the percentage of it actually getting correct, right? You can simulate this and run out of 10 calls, how many gets correct, and then you can just improve it over time and then just improve the prompt and all that kind of stuff. And then build a set of Q&A pairs, product prices, policies, and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, that's basically it. This is all that's done for pre-launch. This is everything that you need to go through to make sure that everything that you build, whether it's the function, the any-then workflows, the connections, any API calls that you're doing, it all works. Also, a bit of a bonus here, assuming you have a voice agent you have like a multi-agent system, right? So you have a voice agent that has let's say an after-hour voice agent and then during office hours voice agent, but it's combined to a single number. And then we can properly route it to the correct agent based on the current time, right? For something like that, you also want to test to see if it's able to properly route to the right agent, so that based on the current time. So we also want to test that as well. But in most cases, this is all done for a single agent, for everything about building this agent and the backend, including like the any-then workflows or the make.com workflows, and then how it actually performs with your own developer's point of view intentions of the call. And also another pro tip is that you could also try to get another developer to test the voice agent that you built, because that way they could have a different perspective and a different way of testing it, as opposed to how you would test this from a developer point of view. So that way they may actually cover certain areas that you may not even have thought of, which is probably a lot better, and it can help you out with debugging and improving the agent. So yeah, I mean, this is essentially it. Just try to keep it as simple as possible. There's a lot more that goes into it, and once you actually deploy it, there's an entire process of how we could refine it and put in during the post-launch process. So if that's something if you're interested in, I could make another video on that and go through it more depth of how we constantly refine it, have conversations with real human interactions, and then improve it and then redeploy and all that kind of stuff. But other than that, I think that should be it. Let me know if you need any questions. Just drop a comment, and feel free to share this video to whoever you want, your grandma, your mom, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.